The supply side of the supply and demand model has many similarities to the demand side. Here we want to understand the quantity of a good or service supplied to the market, which will depend upon the price prevailing in the market. So once again, the independent variable is price and the dependent variable is quantity. We can show this relationship in a table called a supply schedule, or graphically using a supply curve, which shows us all the explicitly defined and implied quantities of a good or service that will be brought to market using the x-axis based on the price prevailing in the market on the y-axis. The law of supply is why the supply curve is upward sloping. As the market price of a good or service increases, we assume the higher price would encourage more suppliers to enter the market. That's because a higher price will raise the likelihood that an additional producer can enter the market and make a profit margin that satisfactorily compensates them for the opportunity cost of producing that good or service. Think of it like this. Imagine a farmer is growing sugarcane. They hear from the news that Congress is going to pass a new subsidy for corn growers in next year's farm bill, effectively raising the market price for corn next year to a new floor. It may be the case that at next year's price, our sugarcane farmer would be able to take home more money by farming corn. If they switch and grow corn for next year's crop, our farmer pretty much made the decision that farming corn provides them more utility after considering the opportunity cost, or the utility provided by the next best thing they could do, in this case, grow sugarcane. That's the logic behind the law of supply. Higher prices attract producers for whom the benefit of growing corn now exceeds the cost. That actually is a good example of something that could change the number of suppliers at every given price point, or shift the supply curve. Like with the demand curve, changes in price cause movements along the supply curve. But using the example of our farmer deciding to leave the sugarcane business to grow corn, their decision to leave sugarcane assumed the price of sugarcane was unchanged. That farmer leaving the sugarcane market would reduce the number of suppliers willing to be in the market at the same price point by at least one, our farmer. That's an example of a supply shifter, or something that fundamentally changes the supply curve's position. In this case, the return from an alternative activity, grown corn, changes the position of the sugarcane supply curve as suppliers switch activities. What else can shift or fundamentally change the supply curve's position? The cost of factors of production, for example, fertilizer, can increase the total costs of production to the point that they exceed the benefits from growing sugarcane for some farmers, leading them to leave the market. Similarly, new harvesting technology could reduce the total cost of production and facilitate more farmers entering the market. A natural disaster like a tornado or even something as benign as a heavy rain season could also make it too costly for a producer to remain in the market, despite the market price of sugarcane being unchanged. Even expectations about the future of the sugarcane market may influence current decisions about remaining in the market, therefore shifting the supply curve in the present. To be sure, graphically, an increasing or decreasing shift in the supply curve is illustrated the same way it is for the demand curve. Shifting to the right indicates an increase in supply at every given price point. A shift to the left is the opposite, a decrease in supply at every given price point. Of course, this is because the supply and demand curves use the same x-axis to show quantity, and quantities along this axis get larger as you move to the right, just like how the price on the y-axis gets larger as you move up. Now, of course, changes in the number of buyers or suppliers in the market, or changes in the amount of supply they'll provide, will have effects that fundamentally change the nature of the market. A loss of buyers could make a market more monopsonist, with buyers having more power to be price setters rather than takers. Similarly, a loss of sellers could lead to a more oligopolistic market, with sellers having more power to be price setters. These distorted markets are more often the case in the real world, and explain why students sometimes have trouble with the supply and demand model, incorrectly assuming that the quantity demanded or sold influences the price in a perfectly competitive market. Well, yes, if we assume a perfectly competitive market in our model, changes to the number of buyers or suppliers at every given price point in our model will change the nature of competition in the model and lead to price changes that are less independent of quantity. More on that